Sam, welcome to the podcast. Let me do a quick intro before we start talking here. Sam is a well-established senior Android engineer with many years of experience. He currently works at Capital One and he lives in Richmond, Virginia. For those of you who don't know, Capital One is a credit card company. In this podcast, we're going to talk about a lot of different topics. The first one is going to be consulting. So that means things like getting clients, billing, what to do if a client asks you to build something that you don't know how to do, which is probably the first thing that would come to my mind if I was getting a new consulting client. What it's like to be a Google dev expert, aka is it worth it? Is that good for consulting? Is it good for going to get jobs? What is that like? We're going to talk about modern Android development, so Jetpack Compose, Viewmodels, Kotlin, navigation component, dependency injection, testing, all of the different architectures that are available, MVI, MVP, MVVM, which one is better, database caching, and probably more topics. Those are just kind of the most hot topics in my opinion. And then we're going to talk about, or well, if we have time anyway, hopefully the most important types of testing, UI tests or unit tests, which ones, in his opinion, are the most important. Flutter, is it worth learning Flutter now that Jetpack Compose is available? And if we have time, his developer story. So how he got started coding. Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Mitch. It was really good to get a random DM out of the blue, and this is fun. I've already... The pre-talk here for 10 minutes has been really fun, so I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I've been following you on Twitter for a while, and I don't know what made me message you. You said something, and I said, "Hey, I should do a podcast with him." I don't know.
See, that's good advice. If you want to get on this podcast, just say something, and you're on.
Twitter's great. Like, someone sent out a tweet the other day. Actually, it might have been me. It said, Twitter is the new Stack Overflow. And I really like that. There's a lot of truth to that. Like anytime I run into a problem and I first, spend a little bit of time on it because I don't want to feel like a dummy and tweet out something they got a common answer. But Twitter's where I go. I tweet it out and I bet you within 15 minutes, somebody tweets back with a good resource.
Yeah, no, I do the same thing. Whenever I hit a problem, I just tweet it out. And it's nice building a network. You two have like a lot of Android devs.
For sure.
They're checking it out. So cool.
So as I said, the first thing I want to talk about here, Sam, is consulting. Do you do consulting? Have you done consulting? How did you get started consulting? Like, what was it like to get your first client? Actually, you know what? Maybe before that, tell us what kinds of consulting you've done.
Software consulting. Yeah. So software consulting, this ranges like web development and mobile development is pretty much it. Like full stack. So a little bit of back end stuff, front end stuff like JavaScript based frameworks, and then Android development. That was my consulting career.
Okay, so how did you get clients doing that?
Good question. So I had I guess this is back in like 2008 or 2009, I think what it was. Is when I had my first consulting gig. So it was just like I had a friend and they had a friend that had it was this company called TrackMate that they built like high sensitivity GPS devices you put in like race cars or like semi-professional race cars. And so they needed like some cool web app to build, whereas people could upload the videos with their data overlaid on it and like kind of create a sharing site there. And so it was like this cool project. They were like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And I was like, sure. So I was already doing government consulting at the time and kind of did it behind the scenes. And there became more work available. And I really enjoyed doing that more than the stuff I was previously doing. So I had negotiated a rate with them. And I like being transparent about, most things. So we'll be open with the numbers. But when I was doing it on the side, I was charging $25 an hour at this time. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But I told the company, hey, if I'm going to leave my other job, I want $35 an hour. And so they said, okay, that's fine. So I went ahead and like left my other job and started consulting, with this company. So pretty much that first job was a word of mouth thing. And we can go into the mistakes of charging too little because that was too little. But I can go into why I thought that was an okay thing at the time and stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming probably at your job, that's, I guess, what you were making around, and then you got that, and you just you gauged it off of your job, I'm guessing, anyway. Yeah,
so at the time, I was, I think, making like $45,000 a year or something like that, or, close to 50.
And doing this government consulting.
Yeah, government contracting. And so at that point in time, I was like, okay, well, 50 grand a year, that's if I calculate it at $25 an hour or something like that. I forgot how I calculated it out. Like, oh, that works. But then you don't take into consideration paid time off, retirement, all these other little things that happen, like billing problems with clients. not getting enough hours from clients. Oh, we'll give you 40 hours a week. Actually, we only have 10 hours this week. There's so many little things like who pays for your laptop, who pays for your Wi-Fi connection, who pays, all these things. So it was definitely a big miss early on, and I didn't have the sort of community. I didn't feel like there was a lot of this community information about what you should do. So I appreciate you, Mitch, and other people in the community like Don Felker and stuff, like sharing information about this to get people aware of it. Because I don't want people to make the same kind of mistake I did there early on.
Not charging enough.
It's definitely not charging enough. Yeah. So
what do you think? What do you think? Easily double, or what is what you think?
You can always make a lot more than you think you can, is the way it works out. So I'll give you another thing. So another way I got a job was through a recruiter. So this kind of goes through the story of like, making more money as a consultant. So I went through a recruiter, and I was up in Boston, and I worked through the recruiter. I got a job at a design agency doing Java backend and front end like jQuery website stuff. That ended up I turned it over to Angular when I was there. So when I was doing that, I got the job. It was awesome. It really connected me with the company, and I got to work with Titleist. So they're like like the largest golf company there is, the most well-known one. And so I got to work on a lot of their internal marketing tools with their team. And so that was really cool. And I was making there, I think, $45 an hour, something like that, which is pretty sweet. So that's like a step up. But then peeling back the covers, I realized we let some time go by after we moved out of the Boston area, and a year went by. So like the recruiting agency I went to was out of the picture. So I got to go directly to the design agency. And then I was able to charge like $60 an hour. And I was like, holy cow. They took $15 an hour out of what I was making. And then a few years later, I let that, I don't know if it was 1 year or 3 years, or I think it was just another year went by. And then I was able to go to Titleist directly. And then I was able to charge $90 an hour.
Oh, wow.
So at the end of the day, I think it was 90. It might have been 75 or something. It was a lot higher. It was 75 or 90 or something like that. It was way, way higher than what I was getting in the first place. And that's because there's all these cuts, right? Like it's directly to the client. That's a large company that can pay something. And then it's like this design agency that has this larger contract, and then the subcontracting down to a recruiter or somebody else that can actually get somebody to do that work for them. So,
wow.
Like, I think it really comes down to is when you go to a large company or you find a large company, then you can get a good rate. Like that was amazing, right? Like when I finally got that, I was like, holy cow, like this is almost $100 an hour. Like this is amazing. Like think about where I was, whatever, 4 years ago, it was $25 an hour, right?
And like what? Yeah. So you just kind of answered the question, I think. Yeah. What? How long had you been working with software at that point when you were able to charge that $100 an hour? And what like technologies were like when you got the job? What technologies did you feel confident in? Did you feel confident in the things that they were asking you to work on? I guess is the question.
Yes, there's definitely room to grow, but I did feel confident. So the back end stuff was very Java based. So it was like J2EE stuff, like servlets. And I had done stuff on JSPs, which were like Java server pages. It's basically a way to like have an HTML template plus Java code kind of all merged together. So that was the back end stuff. And the front end, they just quizzed me on jQuery. They're like, hey, do you know selectors and all these various things? And when I got there, I kind of turned that into to more than that. Like I went to Angular and like kind of the way that we have view model binding and stuff where you can reference properties and things. I made things a lot slicker with that, more like the single page application. But yeah, I had tons of experience. So I had started professional software development out of college in 2004.
Oh, wow.
And so by this time, I guess like at the very end when I finally got it was like 2013, 20. So about 10 years in the industry at that point.
Okay.
When
Feeling pretty good.
Yeah, and I've been coding. My first code was written my freshman year of high school, which was 96, I think, or 97.
Wow,
so,
I was just a lad. Wow.
Well, I mean, and my first code is like there was a thing called Netscape Composer. It had like this web page editing tool, which was a drag and drop. But I got to go in there and got to code all these HTML tables because that's the way you did layouts in there. Anyway, yeah, so I had a decent amount of experience. The work I'd done in the government contracting space was not really web-based, but that's what I got drawn to. Web stuff was really fun for me. And the same way that Android is now, it's something that somebody sees the experience and gets to interact with, and you can you do all these cool things with it. Things I was doing prior in the government contracting space was just like mostly Java. and like Eclipse. Maybe you've heard of that.
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
actually built plugins for Eclipse. So
Oh,
we
wow.
had some cool like drag and drop tools that the company I worked with. And yeah, we built plugins for that. So I was very skilled in Java space, and that translated over. I had the hobby of HTML, and so that translated over, and kind of like
Lots
where
of
my specialty
experience.
ended up going. Yeah, so now
Lots.
it's a lot. Yeah, I don't even know, more than 15 now. So
More than 15 clients you've had, or
oh,
like right
years.
now?
No, just I have years like doing
Oh,
it
okay.
professionally. I think I'm at 17 this September.
Oh, I guess
Um,
yeah. Back then, yeah.
But as far as clients go, so yeah, I got that original client. The Titleist thing took off, but then when I went down, my wife and I moved to Texas for a little while, and I went to some local meetup groups there, and I met a guy who knew a guy because doing contracting, and I ended up working with them, and I think I made $70 an hour with them, and that was great. And that was all basically front end work, doing things. I think it was like Kendo UI at the time, or like Knockout JS. We ended up doing Angular, I think, in the end, but it was just like the really responsive front end designs.
So when
That
you
was
get a
fun.
client, have you ever been asked to do something, like say a guy comes up to you and starts inquiring about doing some work? Have you ever got a client that asked you something that you didn't really know how to do, but then you took the job anyway and knew that you would figure it out? Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
No,
that's a pretty common experience.
yeah, but like it has to be. So I think you tweeted out yesterday like this guy is going to be like super famous one day, like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
YouTuber. So I
Yeah.
went and watched his video, and he's basically like this whole process of like learning as a programmer, and
Yeah.
finally get to the point where you know you don't know everything, but you can be confident enough you can learn something. And so
Yes.
that's the point you need to be at in a certain like stack where you're like,
Mhm.
I don't necessarily know this one little, like in Android now, if you got something, there's a
Mhm.
whole new framework or whatever, like you know you could figure it out, but no, you
Right.
haven't done it
Right.
before. So
Yeah,
I think
that's it.
yeah.
That's a good way to answer it. And yeah, if ever anyone hasn't watched the video that I tweeted about yesterday was February or March 4th. You can go and look at my tweets. Go watch that video. It's a great video. It like outlines your progression from like just starting to code up to like getting this level of confidence where you think you can just figure it out, but you know you don't know everything. It's a great video. I think that guy did a great job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So today, do you still have clients, and do you like still do client work on the side even though you're at Capital One?
I don't anymore. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah, my days are spent a lot, with family and everything else. I don't have time to do client work. Really, the things I do after work are more just like playing around with Android and then creating content. Putting up blog posts or videos and things like that.
Right. I guess
Um,
yeah. That's pretty. Yeah, that's really time consuming. A full time job, family. If you're doing consulting on the side, like you're not spending time with your family. That would
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think keeping up with Android stuff too. That's like a part time job on the side too.
Yeah. No, I literally check Twitter way too much. At least probably every 2 hours of waking days, like, oh, what's going on? And it's.
I do that. I use Twitter as like a break sort of thing. Like if I'm
Yep.
working away every I don't know half an hour 45 minutes, I'll be like, okay, got some stuff done, let's check Twitter for 5 minutes. It's like just breaks the flow.
Absolutely.
All right, so what other consulting questions do I have
Oh,
here?
so should you do it on your own? Should you create an LLC? What should you do there?
Yeah, sure, business stuff. Lay it on
I
me.
mean, well, that's part of consulting, absolutely. So when you're doing consulting or you're building a product, right? A lot of this stuff started with me too, of like, this is the time that like Facebook was starting to take off and everybody has their cool startup ideas. We had like
Right.
500 startups. You had Y Combinator starting up. Like I think I interviewed for a company that was a Techstars company. It's another like incubator that was there in Boston. But so many cool
Boston.
like startup Boston, yeah. I only lived there for 6 months, so I don't know
Didn't get the
all
accent.
I know it's wicked awesome or something.
Wicked awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, all these things were so cool. So I think I've bought over like 100 domain names in my history of
wow.
like, oh man, this is gonna be a really cool startup. And so you buy the domain name and you're like, oh, I got this down. But yeah, in that I was like, okay, if I'm gonna go ahead and sell a product or I'm gonna do consulting, at the end of the day, like who gets taxed? Like what's going on? And maybe it's different in Canada. But really you want to protect yourself in some ways, because especially if you're against a bigger client. Let's say somehow you went ahead and your company did something that ended up causing like a production error, right? And then they want to sue you. Like you need business insurance. It's a little bit different when it's just you, but like let's say it's you and then you hire 3 other people that you work with, right? Like as you grow, it's not necessarily just you contracting, it's more. So to create like a legal entity to do that under is super helpful. So I created a limited liability company, or an LLC. It's called Handstand Technologies, which I still keep open for anything that kind of comes up. But yeah, I think that's a huge thing that people should consider. It's not anything that we're a must-have when you're first starting, but if you do consider consulting in a longer-term fashion, I would consider looking into something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you have something to lose, it's probably a good idea. You know, like if you're just a kid or a young guy or girl and you're starting your consulting, you know, somebody's probably not going to sue you because you really don't have anything. You have nothing to take, you know.
Right.
Whereas if you get more established, you're older in your life, you have assets, you know, probably building the company to protect you is the good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a tax write-off when you get your laptop. Now you can write it off. So.
True. So what about being a Google Dev expert? Has that helped you in consulting? Has that helped you in your job? What has that done for you?
That has helped me in my job. And so here's the thing about it. Like the Google Developer Expert Program, and I'm not allowed to speak too much in terms of like how it all works, but like in general.
Oh, really? Like you can't talk about. Like I thought it was like a pretty.
Sorry, I can't speak on behalf of them, but I can speak of like my experiences, right? So I can't say like this is the way thing works. Like I don't run the programs, all I'm saying. But the overall spirit of the Google Developer Expert Program that I've seen is like you're somebody that like just wants to share to the community. It's not I want to go get this thing on my resume, right? Like I think if people look at it as that and say, "Oh, I want to be a Google Developer Expert because you know it'll help me do better in my professional career," I think that's like something that can happen. I think the real motivation behind all this is really just like, do I want to share with the community and what I'm learning? And by doing that, you're getting the recognition of you doing that, which then helps you like kind of have more of a presence. So I know when I first got listed, like a Twitter list or whatever of like GDEs, I probably got like 500 followers. So that was like huge, right? Like that's something I wouldn't get. And so there's just, it also gives credibility. So that's really nice. But I would definitely not recommend somebody to just say like, I want to be a GDE so I can get a job or something like that. That's not the thing to do. It's more, I want to share things in the community. And then if you do that, then potentially you can get recognized by Google as somebody that is doing that they want to help, keep saying, hey, this person's learning great about Android. So it's a little bit different. It's more just like recognition of community contributions and like that Google wants to continue people that are giving like, expert insights. Really, I feel like it's more insights than anything else. People are like, what is an expert? It's more so just taking something, looking at it and not providing like regurgitated documentation. It's more like, hey, I look like a lot of what you do in your courses and your podcast.
You play with it and you see like what's good, what's bad.
Yeah, and then you give somebody, because you could go try something that's well documented or something that somebody's already done a video or a talk of. But if you can explain a problem you ran into or a different angle you do on it, you're giving insights on it, and that's where it's coming from. So it's not really an expert. Like I'm not an expert in everything, but I've dabbled in enough things where I have expertise, I guess.
It's like an experience sharer. Yeah. It's like, here's what I did. Here's what happened. It's like, you're providing data. They're like data points, and then you get like recognized by Google by an official. Yeah, I get what it is. It's if you're like a content, you're creating the content, whether it's blogs, videos, podcasts, whatever, talks. You become one of these, and Google will say, yes, that is a guy who's talking about things that actually happen and actually matter. And then it's just like gives you that credibility, more credibility, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So that's super important. I just want to make sure it's clear that like what the whole purpose of it is, right? It's just like recognition of that and not really it's something that should get you a job. And if that's it, then it's not the right like motivations, I don't think so.
Right. So do they pay you, or is it just a title thing?
No, there's absolutely no payment. What's nice is like, we basically have like a Slack channel that we're part of. And so, we can Slack people at Google, right? Like not on their internal accounts or whatever, but like if I have a question, like I now have a path of going through that to try to like ask for help or, to get a connection. And sometimes, we're asked to do like help with various things or potentially provide feedback. It's not a thing where everybody's just like, hey, go check out the brand new Jetpack Compose before anybody sees it, right? Like, but it was cool that before it was originally announced of it's like just even happening.
Which was how long ago, by the way?
At I/O, IO didn't happen last year. So was it the year before that or whatever, or maybe the year before that?
Who was that
Forget.
guy? That guy on Twitter was tweeting that he came up with the idea like 4 years ago or 4.5 years ago or something like
Yep.
that.
And Jim was in the room. Yep.
Okay.
So Jim's definitely on the team and been a part of it for sure. I think his last name starts with an S, but I forget.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember his first name.
But
You
yeah,
said it's Jim.
it was really cool though, because when they told us about it, they were like, "You're literally the first people we ever got to tell about this," and I felt bad because I was like, "Does it work on iOS?" Because we knew Flutter at the time, and I was like, "But yeah, it doesn't work on iOS, right?" And
yeah, because at that time you're basically listening to them say they're telling you, "Hey, we're coming up with a Flutter for Android, but it only works on Android." Like that's what it would sound like.
that's what it sounded like me in the beginning. I was like, "Oh," like, and so I've actually pushed, like, Leland Richardson's like amazing and shares so much great content, but he's got interviewed on the Fragmented podcast a couple times about and like Android Backstage and other things about where Compose is, and I love. There's always this clear line of like Compose is actually the compiler that takes composables and then can generate stuff out of it. But like Compose UI is what everybody's talking about Jetpack Compose, right?
Right.
It's the Android layer on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so like when you talk about Compose on the desktop, it's not using the same thing.
It's using the Compose compiler.
Right, exactly. So like I think Jake Wharton had a tweet a while ago where like people are saying Compose when really they mean Compose UI, the Android side of things. And so it's kind of confusing. And I think I forgot who it was.
Well, it's still all like the same like category of thing, right? Like
it's the same category, but it is fundamentally different, right? Compose is like I can target multiple platforms, and I have a way of using Kotlin to generate a composable versus like here's this Android button and UI component and the way I attach the view model. Like it is a different layer of the stack.
Yeah, like you wouldn't be building a desktop app with Compose using
with like,
Viewmodels or
with like Android assets or with your resource strings and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. It's just like a declarative way to like, build composables. It would be the names would be different, the components would be different, things like that if it was desktop. But it's the same sort of thing.
Oh no, totally. Yeah, but I'm very excited because basically the answer has always been going back to like stuff with Leland is there's nothing that would prevent it. Right. So like I know that somebody's going to work on it and someday it'll be a thing. And I'm saying this not out of anybody's told me anything, but in my hopes of, I want the Compose to be the next Flutter. And not next Flutter, but like something that can be cross-platform. There's basically nothing preventing it from doing that. And I'm not saying via any insights that I have or anything, like the Android Compose UI is Android specific, but the Compose compiler and everything, it can be targeted towards whatever.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so that's why I'm trying to create that distinguishment, and that's
right.
That's what Jake was trying to say too. He was like, maybe we should somebody was joking, we should name it like Jetpack Sparkles instead of Jetpack Android. Anyway, give it some other name.
I get your point now. Yeah, I didn't understand what you were saying, but now I get it now. Yeah, because it's confusing. You're making it because Jetpack Compose. It sounds like now it's an Android specific thing, but really the gold in the center is the Compose compiler that can be used on any platform. So theoretically, you could be iOS, web, Android, doesn't matter, and you're still going to have the same sort of mechanisms to build an app. The things would be different, but it would only be slightly different.
Exactly, and I don't know his full name, but Louis or whatever. He's from France, and he's a Kotlin GDE. He actually created a one of those online petition things to actually change the package name to like something like Compose instead of being Android X dot whatever because of this whole thing before it went to beta.
It's a good idea too.
I signed it, but it's in beta now, so it's just kind of set in stone. And so I don't know the full rationale of why they weren't able to change it. I think it makes sense. Google's the one, building it and everything else. Like it is what it is. I'm very thankful everybody's doing it. But like from a conceptual point of view, it would have been nice to have the compiler been, Compose separate instead of Android X. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw Jake's tweets about that, and I thought like I wondered why he was like making such a big stink about like, oh, the name should be different, and I was like, what does it matter? What do you settle down? But I see now. It does matter. It matters a lot.
It matters a lot. And until you kind of can see the different layers of the stack there and like what we could do with it. Like I think it is kind of unclear. So hopefully this conversation can clear it up for a couple people.
Yeah, and I now that I know, I will try to have this conversation more, and I'll sprinkle it into videos amongst wherever I advertise my courses. I'll swap out between, telling people what Compose actually is and advertising my courses in every second video or something.
No, that's all. You make a lot of great stuff, Mitch. That's good. So
Thanks.
advertise it away. Somebody's got to, right?
So like in your day-to-day, you have time to watch like shitty vlogs like what I produce?
So
like you watch a lot of content or?
No, I do not watch a lot of content. I watched your video with Gurupreet, I think.
Yeah,
he's
Guru.
the one with Guru. So yeah, he's the one that did the Compose like cookbook or whatever. Man, he's amazing. Like,
he
oh
is
my
amazing.
gosh. Like, and so I kind of like look through and see like who's been on your podcast, and that's how I knew to put my name as @handstandsam at the bottom of the screen here, because
nice.
I saw that was a good branding thing.
Yeah.
But I forgot where I was going with that. But
oh, do you consume a lot of content? That was the question.
Oh, and the answer is no. Like I literally looked at that when I was going to bed last night, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna be at this podcast tomorrow. Like, what should I expect? So
just a casual chat. Yeah, Guru's
Yeah, but
great. His cookbook is awesome. I love that.
It is.
That repository.
Yeah, the only reason I think I've seen some of your shitty vlogs is because YouTube, I'm subscribed to your channel and not subscribed to too many channels. So it gives me like little notification. And so if I am just sitting around, I'm like, I'll watch a shitty vlog while I'm washing the dishes or something.
Nice. So the shitty vlogs are worth watching. That's good to hear.
They are absolutely, because you always have the teaser in there too. You've got the good marketing thing down where you're like, oh,
that's what people tell me.
And I have this one little thing at the end, so I know to go if it's 9 minutes or 6 minutes in, and then you'll just spill it. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I always wonder like because I don't think like people probably think I think about marketing a lot, but I don't, or I don't feel like I do. So I'm glad. I get a lot of compliments that people say I'm good at marketing.
Yeah.
And it always, I don't know. It's nice to hear anyway.
Well, I mean, you would have to be, right? Like you now run your own like instruction agency now, and who's your marketing person?
Yeah, that's me. I do.
Yeah,
Mitch
so
does it all.
Good job. Yeah, you're able to sustain, so that's good, man.
Sustain life.
Yeah, I mean, you got sweet monitors and all sorts of stuff back there. So.
That's actually hooked up to the Raspberry Pi that I just bought.
Sweet.
I was starting to play around with that. I don't have another desk in here, so I have it on this stupid little table, which is not ideal. Anyway,
so go to CodingWithMitch. Your discount code is this, and
no,
buy a new desktop.
No discount code. Just go to CodingWithMitch and buy it.
Okay. Put in Sam as your discount code, and then message me if it doesn't work. I'm kidding. Cool.
At Capital One, are they like excited about Compose? Like, is there any sort of talks about moving over to Compose?
I will speak where I'm at it. So yeah, I work at Capital One. I'm an architect there on the identity team. So
your title is an architect. You're not like an Android engineer.
So my title is officially distinguished engineer, which I think is weird. Mm-hmm. And so
I'm a distinguished engineer.
Oh yeah, sure. And I was like, that's kind of a lame name. But I asked somebody why, and they're like, well, you're distinguished. You did something that other people didn't do. And I was like, okay. But it basically just means a director in tech. So Capital One's really cool because they have an individual contributor track, which means you can go all the way up to like vice president as somebody who like primarily focuses on coding and technical solutions and not managing people. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that's actually kept me there a long time. So I joined as like
that seems like a good strategy, like as for a company thing, actually, because you always see VPs goes like manager and then like manager's manager and then like VP. Yep. But for a guy to like a technical guy to be able to hold a VP position is probably an asset. And before, like previous company structures, that was just like impossible. But you'd have your CTO probably, but then that'd be it.
Right. No, so it's super cool. Like I don't manage any people. I've been pretty adamant that I don't want to do that. I love coding. But yeah, I'll talk from my perspective and what I've been pushing. Right. So this is all me. There's no plan. There's no official plan from Capital One, and if there was, I wouldn't be able to talk to that. So this is just me and what I've been trying to get people excited about. I do run a little like community group inside of Capital One called Android Roundtable. It's just something I've been running for 2 years or so. But basically, it's a place where all of us that are Android devs there, because there's over like 100 in the company, and kind of come together and talk about cool tech or things that we're doing, sharing across the company. And so I just rebooted that for this year, and I'm going to focus on Compose. I'm so jazzed about it. I've been using it for about 6 months in like my side projects. And I want people thinking about it, because as a large scale app, like how are you going to adopt this thing, right? You have to have people having all the insights into Compose, how it works, how the theming works, like how we're going to set up architecture patterns to go for it and stuff. So I've been thinking about these things behind the scenes, but I want to get a larger group thinking about it. I'm definitely where I'm at. I think in any production, like large scale app, nothing should be used until it's 1.0 official, like not beta or RC or whatever. I think that's just a good rule of thumb. You can always, you know, consider it otherwise. Like it's up to you to make that decision. And I think once it's in beta and you're a startup or whatever, like you're probably fine. But on a large scale app, I think it's conservative. But like once it hits 1.0, I'm going to try to push features we built in it. And so I want people to look into it. And it's obviously like, I don't think there's any efforts now to have people like go do it, but like on the side, like just you and me right now, right? Like it's like if we're developers interested in Android, like we should be at least looking out. Like obviously you don't have to spend all of your free time, but like let's start thinking about that. How would that work in our apps? Like especially large scale, like the theming is a big thing I've been interested in, and then just like how would architecture look like? I'm super excited about the interoperability. So just like the Kotlin transition we did, moving everything to Kotlin, you could do it file by file. Here you can do it like button by button or by layout or whatever else you want to do. And so my team there is the identity team. So we do like all the authentication, sign in stuff related to that. And so anyway, I have more say in that space, but I shouldn't go too deep into work. But yeah, I'm really pushing Compose to be thinking about it because I want to. It's the future of Android, and it's what I really want to do. Whenever I have to look at a recycler view, I kind of throw up a little bit in my mouth.
So yeah, you're basically trying to Those of you who missed that, he said he throws up in his mouth when he thinks about a recycler.
Hey, I said it really quietly, and then you had to echo. All right, fair enough.
So you're trying to sell it, pretty much. You're trying to sell it to the company, I guess, at this point.
Yes, and you have to,
or the preliminary selling of it.
I think most developers are there, but it's to get something like that in a team that's large, you have to have standards set up. You have to have all these other things. And so if you don't have people at a large company looking at it early on and trying to figure out all those little, how to make it work in a large, like, so that you can have somebody that just graduated from college and comes in and can just pick it up and know what the guardrails are, right? Like maybe right now, oh, you're supposed to use MVI and you're supposed to have this much, test coverage and what this looks like how would you know what that is with the Compose? Like we're still figuring it out, right? Like,
right.
So it's just, have more people thinking about that, because as we learned with Kotlin, nobody knew what they were doing with Kotlin. Like Manuel Vivo from the Google team, he used to be on my team, by the way, at Capital.
He's great. Manuel, he's like, he's my favorite out of all of those Google people.
So I stole him. So he was working at Capital One UK, and he kind of messaged me and he was like, oh, like your team's really cool. I'd be interested in that. And so me and my manager, we pulled so many strings to get him to come over to the US. But he came over, was on our team for about a couple of years, and then of course Google poached him. But he's just fantastic. And he did an awesome blog, if you haven't checked it out, on the Android developer site that says what you shouldn't do with coroutines.
I actually bookmarked it. I have it right here, I think.
It's fantastic because it literally says, it shows an example, and it's like, always inject dispatchers, right? And it's like, do not do this. Like, coroutine scope dispatchers.default, like pass in your scope and stuff. There's like, it's literally
do you have that? I actually thought I bookmarked it, but it looked, oh no, I put it somewhere else. I got it. Best practices in Android for coroutines. That's probably it.
Yeah. It literally says, do this, do not do this. And it's super, super like, very
I got it.
Clear,
right
specific. Here. And it's all the things when, like, if you look at it, you'll probably notice, most of them be like, oh yeah, of course. Like
I do all of these stupid things.
Yeah. Well, that too. But the point about it was, it's like coroutines is new, right? Like as far as like in the Android world, like it was just recently in the last year or so when Google's like, we really recommend you using coroutines, right? As an official thing. But they did that, with Kotlin a while back too. And we were all trying to figure out what is Kotlin. Like, I don't know. Like I remember hearing Dan, what's his name? Dan Kim up, he works at Basecamp. He's up in Chicago. Like he was big into Kotlin early on and was on Fragmented podcast. I used to listen to that all the time, and just the kids don't listen to much anymore. But he talked about idiomatic Kotlin when he was on there. Like, how do we approach that? What do we do? And pretty much like people were figuring out, like have you ever heard of Java Kotlin? So Java Kotlin is when you're a Java programmer and you come over and write Kotlin, and you write it in the exact same way you would have done it in Java. So like
Oh,
you
okay.
don't have to use like all of the fancy like constructs. You're not using let and apply and like all these things that like are just kind of like
And you can
natural
just
now.
write it.
Yeah, you just write it out like if this, if then, like you don't know sealed classes, you don't know all these other things. So when people say like, oh, you're writing Java Kotlin, it's like you're a Java developer that just came over. And that's what we all were for a little while.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Compose is going to be the same way. We're going to learn what the best practices are. Same way, you know, I think you were talking with Guru the other week about how we got to like Android team never gave a specific recommendation of you should build your apps with this architecture or whatever. And now they finally have architecture components in Jetpack. And as we go, we learn. But right now we're learning in Compose. They're asking us to do this developer challenge, which is amazing. You guys should do it. Go make your stopwatch this week. Hopefully your puppy apps turned out well last week. But it just gives the team good feedback so that they can make the product better for us.
Yeah, I love Compose. It's awesome. Like it's like I remember when Kotlin first came out, like Kotlin was a much more pleasurable experience to use, like as a guy who writes code all the time, like just hitting the keys and having Kotlin come out was a much more pleasurable experience than Java. And then the same thing is with Compose now, but even more so. Like just it's fun, like just to build apps with Compose. And then thinking about using XML is like, I don't even want to do it. Like I think about it and I'm like, just go away. Just get out of here. It's something I want to do.
And immutable data, I didn't really know what these things were. People said like immutable and functional programming, and I'm like, you know, nerd alert. Like I don't know what these things are. Like because like I started hearing it. Like, I started hearing about them, like you know, in Swift and like everybody starting to use it. But like I finally started doing these things I didn't even know. Like immutable data is so important, right? It's just like you have data that doesn't change because like otherwise it's just an instance in memory that everybody can change values for, and it would be bad. So I realized that, and so in my final days of Java before I got Kotlin, I was writing final for literally every variable that I wanted to be immutable. So it's just like final all over the place. But it made me feel more confident. Like it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Next, I want to talk about. Actually, before we move on, I wanted to ask you something. Since you know Manuel, is there any way you could get Manuel to come on my podcast? Since you have an in.
Yeah.
Probably.
I mean, I don't know what his restrictions are, but yeah, he's awesome. I don't see why he wouldn't come on.
Okay. I mean, I've asked a number of like Googlers and usually nobody responds, but I didn't. So to be fair, I didn't even ask him, but I assumed he would do the same thing that everybody else does and not respond. But so I'll try first, and then maybe if he says no, you can be like, nah, Mitch is pretty cool. Go on his podcast.
No, I don't mind. I will go ahead and I will
brokering the deal.
Him, as long as you smash the subscribe button right here. 500 new subscribers. We'll ask Manuel. So.
Oh, that'd be awesome. He's awesome. He's like
trying to figure out where the video would be. Yeah, there.
Yeah, you got it. It'll be right where your finger was. Yeah, he's like the most responsive. Like he goes out of his way to like get ahead of issues and like make sure people know about it and respond to people on Twitter. And I mean, I'm sure that's part of his job description as a developer relations, but he like does so much more than everybody else. It's awesome.
He's so thoughtful. Like he did this whole blog post series on the Capital One dev blog about coroutines versus RxJava. And like, I think that's what made Google pick up on him too, is like, he just went so in depth with that. Nobody was talking about like them at the time as equals. We were really lucky on my team that we picked up coroutines since like before it was stable.
Oh, nice.
So that was really fun.
Cool. So you guys moved away from RxJava?
We had Rx for a little bit. Yeah. And then we actually had some restrictions. I talk about it in my do-it-yourself dependency injection course, so maybe this will go into dependency or talk that I did. But based on your requirements, sometimes you get restrictions, and so bringing in a third-party library like RxJava wasn't something that was okay. And so we wanted to do reactive programming still, and because Kotlin coroutines was part of Kotlin, we won that argument and got to use it. So at the time, there weren't even flows. It was just channels. But it worked.
At Capital One, how important is testing? You mentioned, I think, test coverage when you were talking about how you guys are going to move over to Compose. How I guess just start with, how important is testing, and then maybe how important do you personally think testing is? Because maybe that isn't aligned with what you do at Capital One.
No, testing is, I mean, I'll just say for Capital One, testing is very important for software development, and there are high rigorous bars for testing. As far as testing goes for me, I never wrote tests before I came to Capital One. If you told me like, oh, do you write unit tests? I'm like, oh, like 2 + 2 = 4. Like, I'm not building a calculator app. How do I even test that?
Yeah.
And so like, I didn't know how to do it. And so being at Capital One, I was finally on a project where I was like, wait, I've been working on the project for 6 months and I don't have to go do something else now. Like, I'm literally going to make sure this is stable and prod for a long time. So that was a big game changer. And there were some other people on the team that were good at testing. So I learned about like dependency injection. We were using Dagger 1 at the time. And then basically we used package private variables to do dependency injection and tests. And that was really cool. But the thing that really got me going was we had a UI automation suite that was written in Appium. And so this was managed by some people that weren't primarily developers. And so they had this test suite that ran for about 4 hours, and it was usually super flaky. So like, if you look back at some of the talks I did some on WireMock and about testing, hermetic testing, and all these other things, screenshots of testing. I came up with this whole thing using Spoon, and I made my own like Mac Mini that had like multiple emulators spawning off on Jenkins and stuff. But we were able to run like hundreds of UI tests on mock data, like, mocked HTTP calls and everything else like that, and had them running like very stable. And so like, it was just, I love testing. I think there's lots of layers of testing. Don had a really good keynote at Android Summit. Good shout out. It's a good conference that we helped run. But he had a really good keynote, not this past year virtual, but the last one in person, about testing layers and stuff. So.
Yeah, UI tests in particular, I obviously think testing is important, but UI tests, especially with Espresso, I always found to be flaky. Like, there's random things that just would make it fail. And they're like, when I say random, like, it's random, like it is. And then you wonder why. And it makes me angry. And I don't know if like there's other people who get like less flaky tests, because I don't think I'm doing something wrong, but I don't know.
No, there's a lot of things you can do. Check out my old talks. It's not there. I forgot what it's called exactly, but I do a good one on Espresso. I think the big things are hermetic tests and deterministic tests. So what that means basically is control all of your outside factors. Don't worry about hitting external network. Don't worry about hitting Bluetooth or push notifications. Like, just like with the dependency injection, you can mock all those. And then you're just down to the UI, like you're talking about, like Espresso matchers and stuff. So like with there, make sure your threading's all correct, where for coroutines, like you're using like everything on the main thread, which is bad. But like basically there's ways that you can
a test though, you want it do it on the main thread.
Yeah. So you can basically monitor all that. I think there's the async task thread pool that it monitors, so you can like use that executor with. Anyway, there's things you can do there for that. And then as far as the flakiness with the UI, depending on how you're testing it, sometimes you just end up with scenarios where you're like, oh, I need to scroll down 7 times and then check something.
It's scrolling. Scrolling is the big one. Anytime you got to scroll, it's like, if it's a static screen that you're not scrolling, it's usually pretty reliable, but throw scrolling in there, I don't know what's going to happen.
All right, so that's why it's flaky. You're scrolling. Don't scroll anymore.
Don't scroll. Okay, got it. What about like unit testing, not UI testing? Which one do you think is more important? The instrumentation tests or the unit tests?
The answer is both. A lot of the stuff I do doesn't necessarily involve UI. Like, it does at the end of the day, but like where I'm at, I'm usually like writing like kind of more platformy stuff. Like, and so unit tests are so key to that. Like,
oh, I guess for you, because you're a sign-in flow, register flow kind of guy, authentication. So there's a lot of like Kotlin logic.
Yeah, there's a lot of just like business logic in there. There's, potentially writing to data sources or APIs or all these sorts of things, like handling every scenario you can get in those. I think it really just comes into clean like dependency injection to make it happen. But if you can do that, and there's a whole debate over fakes versus mocks.
Are you a faker or mock guy?
I'm a faker guy, but I did a post.
I like fake too.
Ryan Harder ripped me a new one, but he did it out of respectfully. He DM'd me. He's like, "Hey, can I rip you a new one?" And I was like, "Yeah, go for it." So he basically, I wrote a blog post that was like, "Wrap your mocks." So if you have to use a mock, you can wrap it in something else. So you're not drilling directly with Mockito. You're basically directing with something that looks like a fake, but underneath the hood, it's a Mockito mock. So check that out. But then he kind of rips into it and talks about how definitely you should always use fakes. There's definitely just some exceptions where you have to use a mock. And so like there are some reasons, but in general, if you can use fakes and use dependency injection, like unit test the heck out of it. Like you can do so much with it. And depending on how you test, like I don't like Mockito really, because it would be like verify that these 3 functions were called while this method was executed. Like that's not the kind of thing that you really need. What you would need to do is, if that method is called, it should result in something. So at the end, you should verify the result is what it is.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, like every use case is a black box where you know what's going in, test what comes out, and
exactly.
And so it's like you're testing the mechanism in the black box. That's the thing that you want to do. Test the inputs, measure the outputs.
And what layer should that be at? Like all of them, really? I mean, if you're testing at the higher layer though, and everything's working together, and you don't have tons of like logic underneath, that's the most important part. You mentioned the word use case though. Is that a thing for you? Like I use use case sometimes.
That's just my terminology. Like it means a set of logic.
Okay, that's the same I have.
A sequence of logic. Yeah.
Cool. That's what mine is too. It's like basically some sort of business logic where I take like persistence, and then I take a singleton that does something else, and I make sure that it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it does.
They all go in and do the thing, and the thing comes out.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm glad we're
on the same page.
I've told somebody else that, and they're like, "No, that's not what a use case is." So, yeah.
What do they say a use case is?
Something else that's not correct. See, 2 of us were correct.
You're right. We're right.
Yeah. There you go.
At Capital One, do you do? You might not be able to talk about this, but I'm going to ask anyway.
Sure.
At Capital One, do you do any hiring? Like you personally, are you involved in hiring?
A little bit. I'm capable of doing some interviews. There's different types of interviews and different trainings for them. I typically haven't done a lot of tech interviews. And when I have, I've realized I'm a big softie. Like,
okay.
Like I don't know. It's a really good skill to learn. But like I'll go in and be like, oh cool, yeah, you know about retrofit? Oh, all right, sweet, and like kind of start talking like we're having this like fun conversation as developers. But like I haven't learned how to really drill in and understand like.
Do they understand?
Do you understand logic? Like why would you use a array list versus a generic list, and like all these like little things that you would want to look at, just like. It's just like we talked about, like all the little gotchas and learnings of like whether it's coroutines or whatever else. Like you can see if these people have learned these things, and it kind of says where they are progressing along with what they know. And I haven't been exercising that skill to be good at it, so I'm part of the process for some hires. But like when you think of a typical coding interview, that's typically not me.
Okay, because my next question was going to be like, what do you think is the best way to interview someone? You can answer that if you want. Like, and then some examples are, whether it's a take-home project, hardcore like algorithm data structures, system design, or just chatting. I think you sort of answered. You said that just chatting is obviously a bad idea because you are.
It's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. It's an important part of it. It makes sure that the ability to communicate and personality, and like just making sure that the person is not like able to communicate and be somewhat friendly, right? Like you don't want
not a piece of shit.
Right. So that is a layer of screening, and that's very important. But I think if you want somebody on your tech team, you really need to kind of walk them through some sort of algorithm problem. And I'm not like, I think if I got interviewed for a job like Google or Square or one of these other places that do one of these whiteboarding sessions, like I don't know how well I would fare. Like I'm not that smart.
You got to study these things. I think like you have to like it's like a course you take. Like you spend 3 months studying those questions. That's how you do it, I think.
Yeah, no, I think and more so it would be like I like the way you can interview somebody of like, okay, you said you worked on Google Maps, let's say, right? Like Google Maps SDK integration. Cool. Like tell me about it. And maybe that's not a great example, or maybe you built a view with an app with a recycler view. Tell me about it, and just have them talk for like 5 minutes. And it shows how deep they can go down the rabbit hole. If they're just like, oh, I use a recycler view, that's great. Okay. Well, Is it, how do you specify if it's vertical or horizontal? And that's super basic. And then, okay, if you're going to do that, what's the view holder pattern? And then like, what do you do, if you have multiple sorts of data coming in and like all that stuff, like you can go really deep. And if you let the person kind of guide it on their own too, it does give you a good understanding. Like one of the things I've been involved in before, they were like, oh, so you know stuff about testing. So tell me about that. And I just like rattle on for 10 minutes. And they're like, okay, you know about testing. So that's a good way to do it too. But some sort of structured problem where you see, does the person, like we were saying, do they understand the concepts of what they need for this job, but also just how do they think? And I don't know the best way to evaluate that personally. I don't think
anyone does.
It's imperfect. We hear so many things about it, but
yeah. It sounds like to me that there's no like best answer. I personally think, but of course I have never done any hiring. I personally think that the take-home project is likely the best assessment because you give people time to work on something real. You can like look at their code, actually look at it, and then discuss with them after, like, oh, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? Blah 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 blah. But then that's also the most time-consuming. Like for a company doing hiring, that's like you need somebody who knows. You have like one of your top guys doing code reviews and doing the interview. That's really time-consuming and really resource-heavy. So I don't know.
That's why I don't like that too. Is let's say a minute right now, like let's say I want to go get a job, and I go do 3 different job interviews, and now I have to write coding like projects for a week for each one of those. I'm not getting paid for any of them. Where do I find the time? And I'm going to get rejected by 2 or 3 of them anyway, right? Like that's a complete waste of a week for me on each one of those. So I like the concept more of like, what do you know? And I think this is the reason why you should put stuff in GitHub, right? Like you should have a project out there where you can use that example and talk through why you did various things. And I think that instead of you writing something for that use case, you can just say, hey, I already have this example. Let me walk you through why I did these things. And you can pretty much tell if somebody actually did it themselves or if they just copied somebody else's project and are like, oh, this is great.
Pretty easy, I think, to tell that.
Definitely. Yeah.
So in your whole career as a software developer, as an engineer, what do you think is like the most important thing, the most valuable thing that you ever did to advance your career?
Oh, I absolutely know the answer to this question.
Great.
Specialize.
So in like Kotlin specifically, or like a certain part of Android, or like
you pick.
Tell us more. Anything. Oh, so anything.
Like
specialize in something.
I am an expert at AWS Lambdas. I am an expert at reactive programming on what. Anyway, the thing that happened with me is I was doing all these web contract, like full stack web. So like I could do a Java backend or like Angular front end or whatever else, and the super valuable skills and something that could make me up to $100 an hour. But then I was getting contracts offered to me of like, hey, PHP or ASP.NET or this other JavaScript framework. It was just like I got put in a pool of people where it's very hard to distinguish themselves, right? Like who can build a website? And the answer is almost everybody. But who can build, like, if you were an Angular developer and you knew like best in class things in that, you could completely brand yourself, especially if you're blogging about it or creating content about it, to show that you are having those insights about this and you're working on it, that like I am one of the best people at Angular, and then I can help you and your company take these best practices and things and take them somewhere. So where I got this tip was I had a friend that was an iOS developer. She got on a coding boot camp, and when she got out, it was a couple months later, and I was talking to her. She was like, oh yeah, I make $100 an hour. And I was like, what? Like, you literally didn't code before. You went to a coding boot camp and you're making $100 an hour.
Wow.
And it was just because she did iOS. Well, and she's amazing, but like, she did
iOS. That though.
She did iOS, which has enabled her to get a job where she can make a significant amount of money like immediately. And so after having the conversation with her, I thought about it more, and I was like, well, what do I really enjoy doing? Or like, what do I enjoy doing, and what's the best opportunity for me? And I knew with web, it was very hard to disambiguate like what your expertise was. And so Android was there. I really liked Android, and so I just leaned into it. And yeah, it's been great. So
specialize. Practical advice from Sam Edwards.
There you go. From Natasha Murasev. That's who I got it from.
Thanks, Natasha. So do you like the direction that Android is headed in then? I think I pretty much already know the answer to that. Like compared to how it was, I don't know, 10 years ago. Do you like the progression that Android has made and the direction, the future, what it looks like?
So Yes. Is it good enough? No. Keep working harder. No, I'm very appreciative, especially like knowing a lot of people that work on the platform now. Like we've come so far and it's so great. But like, just in that like back of my head, like if I could step away from any sort of like knowing anything, it's like, hey, we have Compose. It's like, okay, does that work on iOS? It's like that immediate, like,
Right.
there's so many more as a developer, like, why can't we write code that runs on iOS? Flutter is so compelling, and maybe we're jumping to that topic now, but like, I could write an app once. And I did see your thread with somebody else yesterday, I think on Twitter.
Probably
See
Simran.
Twitter's?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, I had to write this app and I had to do Bluetooth and all these things and all these various plugins, and it took me so much longer to do it in Flutter. And that's why I have the blog post. If you check it out, it's called "It Depends" is the answer to every question on Android.
I think I did read that actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it's true. Like, should you use Flutter? And the answer is it depends on the use case. But Flutter is an amazing thing if you're building like basically a content-based app or something pretty simple that doesn't use platform APIs. But then when it scales out, it doesn't scale out. So you're always going to have to write some platform-specific code. If there's plugins like Go Take a Picture, like that's something that you could have where it interacts with the system API. Everybody does it. But when you're talking on Bluetooth or you're doing something special, it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, I did a month on Flutter. I spent a month on Flutter, and I thought it was awesome. Like, great developer experience. Like building the UIs, very pleasurable. I loved it. But it was all simple stuff. Like all the simple stuff was like awesome. Then I just thought like, when it got to the complex stuff, services, platform specific stuff, like there's inevitably going to be issues. And then at that point, you're always going to ask yourself, I mean, if you're already a native guy, like, are you going to save more time by learning Flutter and building it in Flutter, or are you going to save more time by just going and learning the other platform?
Yeah,
you're probably going to save more time by going to learn the other platform, and then you get something that is native, and you're going to save, like, because if you run into a hang up on Flutter, it's probably going to be a really big hang up. Whereas if you run into anything natively, you'll be able to solve the problem, like for sure. Whereas
your answer there is specialized, right? So like if your thing is that you want to build an app that like you want to specialize in building basic apps that don't need these sort of things, then Flutter's an amazing option.
Oh yeah.
Like especially as a consultant, like, oh, I shipped your new appointment booking system, right? Like that's something that could be pretty much easily done in Flutter, right? Like, great, I went ahead, it hits REST APIs, it shows UIs, let customers
does some caching.
But it works, and I ship to both platforms, and I'm an amazing developer, and that's the right decision to make. Like I would totally do Flutter then, but if you need the specialization as soon as it comes to the point of doing more than that.
Right.
So are you going to use Kotlin multi-platform then? Does that solve it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in my video I made in my shitty vlog the other day, I basically asked and I said, hey, like, what do you guys think? KMP or Flutter? And 95% were KMP, like people commenting. So I mean,
I'm wondering though, are people biased? Are people that we know biased?
I think for sure my audience is biased for sure. Yeah. But also like I was leaning that way anyway after talking to Simran and like just talking to people. I just I like Flutter for sure, but like for me and my audience and like my personal like what I want to do personally is I think I would rather like specialize, like you said, and really get down into the Kotlin Android rabbit hole, the new stuff. There's not a lot of content out with KMP, which is a really good point that a lot of people made. Like there's tons of Flutter content. There's all the Flutter content you could ever want out there right now. Like, but where's the KMP stuff?
I don't know, but you can build your own Slack app or own Spotify app in Flutter in just 2 hours. Just watch this video. Anyway, like all the videos I saw out there were like, look, I recreated this cool application in just 2 hours. Like here's Facebook.
But those are all like all those guys, like they're just the UI. They're not like
exactly. Yeah. There's so much behind it.
Yeah. All the behind stuff is more. Like that's where all the real stuff happens. The UI is nothing, especially with Flutter.
Yeah. And it's the whole thing too. Like I've seen so many you see startups, you're like, well, how did they just do this thing in like 2 months that would have taken me like 2 years to do? And you're like, oh, well, they didn't worry about caching, or they didn't worry about accessibility, they didn't worry about like all these things that really matter, or scaling or whatever else, right? So
yeah, they just slapped it together and put it out there, which is fine.
Great. Yeah, totally. It's just a different requirement set.
Yeah, it's like the there's always the question of like how should you build your app if you're just starting?
Yeah.
And like I always answer, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a lot of I don't have any apps in production. I'm not working for a big company, but like I would say get it as fast as possible to revenue. Never mind anything else. Prove your concept and then worry about all the other stuff. You
Absolutely.
know? Just hey, how long do you have, by the way? I didn't specify when we started.
I probably have 10 minutes till my kids get home, and they're loud. So
okay, no problem. Yeah, I was planning on doing an hour anyway. Okay. I'm just thinking. Oh, so the last thing I actually want to ask you, or one of the last things, is so building an app today. What is your like? What are the components, the Android components that you would use? And I'll just kind of jog your memory here, and you can kind of choose the ones. So the first question is Compose, but if you answer yes to Compose, a lot of these other questions don't matter. So I'll say Compose, and then I'm going to say the other things. Single activity or multiple navigation components, or navigation component, or the classic fragment navigation. Would you use a navigation drawer? Would you use a bottom nav? If you were using navigation drawer or bottom nav, would you have multiple backstacks, or would you just hide the navigation when you navigate away from one of those primary locations? Viewmodels, would you use like a single master repository for all of your quote unquote use cases, or would you have like individual use cases? Recycler views, would you use like the paging library to handle pagination, or would you build your own custom pagination system? Would you use Room for caching or something else? And architecture, MVVM, MVI, MVP, whatever.
Made this easy for me, man. Read my blog post. It's called It Depends, the answer to every question in Android development. Is where it's at. No, if I was just to write it, I mean, that's truly the answer. So you'd have to give me the use case, but the things I like in the patterns.
Yeah, the things you like then. The things you like then. That's the question.
The things I like and have been proven out to do really well is MVI. I love me some MVI. I haven't looked into Mavericks yet, but I've talked to Gabe about it. Gabe Peel.
What's that?
Mavericks is an MVI framework. With Compose as well. Gabriel Peel, he's a Kotlin GDE as well. He worked at Airbnb. Now he works at Tonal. He's just amazing. He built Lottie. If you've used Lottie, so he built the Android version of that.
Actually,
I love Lottie. Use Lottie. But yeah, he's amazing. He wrote Mavericks with some other people at Airbnb, and if I was like, I've already tweeted about it. Like I have a homegrown version of MVI that I use now, but if I had to use one from an open source project, I'd probably check that out first.
Maverick.
Yeah, it's MVRX, but like people are having problems like pronouncing it, so they pronounce it Mavericks, but it's MVRX. It's under Airbnb. And so I would use that as my MVI solution. The whole reason too is like it gives you universal unidirectional data flow. Is that what it is? So basically it's like, everything you do in your app, you create a view model, the view model renders it. I mean, you look at like what Compose is, or even with Android views, like you want a source of truth for that, you just want to render it out. And Compose does this beautifully, right? So if you've written your app in MVI already, you can just move to Compose and then just pop it in there. Like it's a great investment to make. So I do that. As far as like dependency injection, I don't even know if you said that.
Yeah, I think I did. Maybe
if it's a new thing, I might consider Hilt. But for my own, I just use do-it-yourself constructor injection with Kotlin.
Okay. Good old-fashioned manual dependency injection.
Dude, go check out my talk right here or wherever. It's called DIY dependency injection with Kotlin.
After this, send me all the links. Like, send me a bunch of links, and I'll put them in the description of the video.
Okay, sweet.
Whatever talks you remember mentioning.
Yeah, sure.
Or maybe you didn't even mention. Doesn't matter.
Sure, let's put a ball in there. But yeah, no, I like it. It's so with name parameters, with like defaults, like it's constructor injection is just really, really nice. And it's very, very straightforward. So anyway, I would suggest I would do that because I know how easy it is. But I think if I was going to go, I've heard so many good things about Hilt. I have not used it personally.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It seems like it kind of does what it's supposed to do. So I don't have anything against it. I'm just saying with what I know, I'd use DIY. But that would be good.
Yeah, Hilt's awesome. It's like, well, I mean, everybody knows Dagger is not easy to learn, and Hilt is just it's just simplified Dagger. Yeah, I know. I got nothing but good things to say about Hilt.
No, and Manuel worked on it, right? So we can't.
Oh, that's why it's great.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Anything Manuel touches turns to gold. I get it.
Pretty much. Like networking, I love OKHTTP, whatever it is. It depends on what the stack would be. Like, would you even use HTTP2? Would you use gRPC? Would you use like something else? Like, I don't know. It depends on the use case, but I love OkHttp. I think they've rewritten it now, so it's multi-platform, or am I making that up?
Not sure.
I know he rewrote it in Kotlin. I think it is. Persistence, SQLDelight. Shout out to Alex.
I heard a lot of people use that.
Cool. Well, you should check out my talk on SQLDelight. It's called Select
Links
Star.
down below.
No, it's called Select Star from Kotlin. I did it at DroidCon New York City and DroidCon Boston. And so that's a good one. It compares Room and SQLDelight.
Oh, nice.
And check out the one from New York though, because the one I did in Boston, I said, you should probably stay with Room. And then it was like 6 months later, and I was like, you should probably go to SQLDelight.
I really like Room, so I probably will watch that talk. Because if you're telling me it's better than Room, then that's it's
different. It's better, and you'll see in there, unit testing is better because you can do it on the JVM without any sort of Android stuff going on. I don't know if that's changed, but also it's KMP. So there you go.
Nice.
You want multi-platform?
I have to check it out then.
Yeah. So that's database there. What other pieces are part of the puzzle?
That's actually a pretty big thing. Like if they don't make like something that is multi-platform for KMP that Android developers could use, SQLDelight is going to be the choice then. If I'm sure Compose is heading in that multi-platform direction. I'm sure that's like the goal. Like, because why wouldn't it be the goal?
It can be, which is the beautiful part, with those layers of the stack. What other pieces did I miss? I think when you went into like shape recycler views, view models, things like that, I think the way that the Android system can always use the way that they have view models where it handles activity, rotation, and all that stuff, like that's amazing. I don't use Android view model itself, kind of like hijack it and shove our own view models inside of view models. But we use that framework because like, why would you not? Rotation changes are just something we shouldn't have to worry about. And with Compose, it's a lot better because it just re-renders and it's like already in your view model state. So I don't know. I've never really gone down a lot of these routes. Like I haven't used Hilt. I haven't used really view model in the way it's supposed to work. I always heard about things where it's like our live data. I never even used that. But like the complaint was always it has to work on the main thread, which makes sense on Android. You want to report back. But I think it's at least a thing with state flows and mutable state flows. I love them.
I mean, you don't need live data if you're using flows.
Yeah. Just use a state flow for that, and you're good.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What other pieces did I miss?
Navigation component.
Oh yeah, navigation. So I really like the new nav piece that we have in Jetpack Compose. Now I think like you've gone on one of your videos, and I didn't look at it, but I like maybe glanced at it. I didn't watch it.
Yeah, but it's a navigation system with just composables.
Yeah, but it's like multi-layered, right? It's not just like the front door. It's like you can go into a component and then have navigation inside of that component. Yeah. So okay, yeah. So I haven't done that far yet, but I've just used the nav component from Jetpack Compose like top level, and that worked really well. I did it where like you can in this app I have, it connects to a Bluetooth bike and then saves workout data, and so you can view a list of workouts and then go to a specific workout. And I use the navigation to component to like be able to send in URL parameters, kind of like it's almost a URL that you're passing in, like a deep link, and it goes over to that. And I really like that a lot. As far as single activity versus multiple, I would say like mostly single, but like if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Basically, things that are related should be its own activity. And with Compose, you kind of get away from having that be a question even.
Exactly.
So,
well, I think that was probably. Oh, I mean, I wanted to ask you about Lottie. Let's talk about Lottie because I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about it at all. No, and it's been on my list, like fairly high on my list for a long time, but it keeps getting like pushed down. So, tell me about it. It's something to build animations with. It's super cool. Like, how does it work? I'm super curious.
Amazing. No, so Gabriel Peel wrote it. He did a talk at DevCon, which used to be a thing. I think this was like 3.5 years ago, and I basically got lunch with him and we talked about it, and I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. So yeah, Lottie is a nice way. It basically works on this thing called body moving, which is a JSON format, an export that's like kind of like SVG, but it contains animation stuff in there. It's an export from an Adobe tool called After Effects. Is that right? I think it's After Effects.
I think that's right. So I've seen the files. They're like these weird files that kind of look like JSON, and
it's kind of like the same if you looked at an SVG. Similar to that, just like a lot of like geometric data points and things, because it's all vector based stuff. But yeah, what's nice is it goes through a design flow. So usually if you get a designer to give you something. You got something like back in the day, a Photoshop file, or maybe like a Figma file or whatever else. But especially if they have something that's not trivial, like an animation or something like that, it doesn't, like, let's say like you booked a trip in Airbnb or whatever, and you wanted to have some cool, like, oh, you booked, this is the example that Gabriel gave. You booked a trip in Paris, right? So you want to have the Eiffel Tower with like fireworks go off because of that. Or if you're in New York, maybe you do something with the Statue of Liberty or whatever else, right? These sort of dynamic designs, if you were to tell me to go do that in a vector animation on Android, oh my gosh, that would take forever. And there's no tools. Like I saw, like, I think Chris Baines had been typing up for one of the Google examples they had. Like he had to transform one of those over, and he did an amazing job. But it's so much work to do that, where with After Effects, a designer goes through with this nice drag and drop tool they use. They hit export, and then that file is now ready for Lottie. You just plug it in. It's super small file. It's vector based, so it looks slick no matter how big the screen is. You can change like the frame rate and how fast it goes. You can change the coloring of different parts of things. You can put it in loops. Like, it's just an amazing way to play vector animations, basically. And so the thing that's amazing too is it's JSON format, so you can go ahead and download these dynamically as well, right? So in that case of like an Airbnb booking where you're like, hey, this is a different city, you can dynamically download that Lottie animation and then play it. So like, let's just say you had
resources.
Yeah, not at all. And so, and the resources are super small. I just tweeted out yesterday night, like this really cool Lottie animation about like just an Android Jetpack thing that somebody made. But I was going to try to use that for my countdown timer app for the Android Dev Challenge. But Lottie in beta 1 is not working well right now with Compose, so I kind of gave up on it.
So you just learn how you do Adobe After Effects, and you output whatever one of their file formats, and then you use Lottie, and boom.
Yeah, so I would suggest you as Android, not necessarily you, but an Android developer, like if you work with a design team, then it's a great experience. Otherwise, lottiefiles.com is a great like place to get free Lottie files like that people have already created, or you can go ahead and pay for some of them. But like there are already animations there that then you can use, and you can change the color layers or the speed and things like that. It's limited because you're not changing the whole animation, but if you find something there, you can use it up like right off the bat. But if you have a design system where a designer knows these tools, it works really well. But I would not go suggest, because I think it's a lot of learning for like you being Android developer Mitch, like to go over and learn how to use After Effects. I think that's hard.
It probably like even could be practical to go to like Upwork or whatever, and hire a guy to make a After Effects animation. Like
absolutely, and they give you the final
like
file
$5,
and
$5, $10 or something, and be that's a good idea.
I love Lottie. Always loved it.
Very cool. Use it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to talk about? Any talks you want to advertise? Anything at all?
That's follow me on Twitter. I'm at Handstand Sam. I love Android. I've been doing it a long time. I've kind of like I've been saying, I'm an individual contributor. I like staying in code. It's fun for me. I like talking to developers like you, Mitch. And I just like it. I don't have anything to sell on here, right? So I'm very fortunate that you reached out, and I'm glad to be talking on here, and love to keep talking about this kind of stuff.
Awesome. So if I can't hook up with Manuel, you'll help me.
I was 500 right there. Subscribe button.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully we can do it again sometime. Maybe if you ever leave Capital One, you can come back on here and then talk about more of the juicy details.
No comment. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Sam.
All right. Cheers.
See ya.